Okay, I'm Tucson Morrison with On-Site Public Media, and I'm here with 4 members of the Stillwater community. If you just want to quick let us know who you are and what you do and how long you've lived in Stillwater, that'd be great. And whatever you want us to know about yourself.
My name's Sydney. I've lived in Stillwater on and off for the past 15 years, and I work downtown.
And I'm Ann, and I have lived in Stillwater. Grew up on the east side of St. Paul. I moved to Stillwater when I was in high school, so graduated from the class of '92. And I'm also a business owner in town.
And my name is Nico. I use they, them pronouns, and I actually live in White Bear Lake, but this is my mom's studio, and so I help out with Tai Chi classes here, and I'm involved sort of from afar, but pop down quite a bit.
My name's Amy, and I'm an acupuncturist, and I live in White Bear. However, I have been in business here in Stillwater for 6 years now, so I have my studio here.
Okay, well, I want to start with being a business owner here. What has that experience been like, and has the community responded to the work that you do, like with restorative practices here? How has that been for you?
It's been really interesting. There's not a lot of people of color, business owners in Stillwater.
Yeah.
But I am very encouraged. More recently, there's been some noticeable changes that I have never seen in the past 6 years that I have been here. My studio, a couple of years ago, there was some hate mail that was dropped off at my studio, and which was, for me, being a person of color, was very traumatic. And I realized, as I talked to other business owners, they didn't realize how it could affect a person of color. And most of them are white, and so that's why they take the material and they just, recycle it, maybe think, extremist, and then just recycle it. I receive materials and I go in a full-blown panic. I don't know if I'm being targeted. And I call the police, and it turned out, the whole neighborhood was canvassed with this material, but I was the only one to call the police. And so, in talking to other business owners, what I really realized is it just wasn't on their radar. They just thought it was just a benign.
What does that communicate to you when you're the only person that calls the police after an entire community is canvassed? I mean, predominantly a white community, and I don't know if you're the only business owner of color here, but what does that communicate to you that you were the only one that called the police?
What I realized was that there was a teaching opportunity. I mean, there was an opportunity to let them know that this is not just a benign act. That these organizations are checking out to see how a community will, are they welcomed in this community? Can they, slip through, so easily? And I think when we just take materials like that and not say anything and just recycle it, I think the message that they get is they go on to the next business and keep going.
Would you feel encouraged if white business owners responded as in the same fashion that you did?
Yeah, and that's exactly what needs to be done. And what we did was there's a local group, they're called the Persisters, and it's a human rights group, and they came and supported me, which I really appreciated at that time. And with that, we started an initiative to talk to downtown business owners, and so we met with Main Street Stillwater, met with the businesses there. I got to tell my story, and I think that's helpful for people, white business owners, because it's just not on the radar. And so for them to hear how it affects me and people like me, I think it's very helpful. And so we started the initiative to have the all are welcome here signs. And so that went out to a lot of the business owners who chose to have that sign, because it's a decision that they have to make, as a business owner. And so I think there's some work that can be done there, and I think it is helpful. I mean, signs like that I think is very helpful for business owners.
Okay. Nico, how long have you lived in Stillwater?
I live in White Bear by my mom, and so, but I've been coming down and helping with Tai Chi classes in this studio space quite a bit. And then when I was growing up, I took ballet classes down here in Stillwater, and so that I took those classes in sort of like a pivotal time in someone's life, figuring out what it's like to exist in a body in a very like spotlit environment, in an environment where I was the only there was one other Asian person in my class, and we have experiences with that studio with being highlighted in certain ways and then totally erased in certain ways, and that's largely in casting, unfortunately. It's a lot of the stories, right? The ballet stories are not necessarily inherently racist, but the costuming can be, the dance style can be, often is, right? And then there's a certain weirdness to be cast as Chinese for so many years in a row, right? And my sisters have stories too, and so that's hard. But also, we were talking earlier about there's also a unique piece of being biracial. I'm half Filipino and half white. And so also trying to figure out what does it mean to be Asian and what does it mean to be biracial in a space where everyone I know is white. Almost everyone I know is white, right? And so how do you navigate that? I was homeschooled at the time also, and so my social circles was largely from ballet and from various other like co-ops that we did. And those were all very white spaces. And so growing up in a white space, trying to figure out where I fit in as a biracial person, half white and half not, is very challenging and very damaging. And so I ended up in college and got a degree in social justice, partially because I was there as a full adult by someone's standards and still trying to figure out what it meant to be holding all these identities, because all I had to reference was whiteness.
And you mentioned that in the beginning, what it was like being in the body, and how did that? You said it was also damaging being there. Would you even edge towards the word possibly traumatic at all from those experiences doing ballet? You say you're trying to figure out the relationship with your body and your social identity. Would any of that ring as traumatic, or was it just damaging?
I think traumatic, yes, because then the amount of unlearning that I had to do before there was even space to grow into being biracial was enormous, right? And that's not even counting the damage of feeling constantly judged for the way that you look, right? And some of that comes just with ballet as an art form, which is challenging. There's been lots of discourse around that lately, right? And some progress. And so it's challenging just inherently to be in a position where you're judged on the way that your body looks and how well it can do things, and that's not unique to ballet. But yeah, to have it then be sort of at an intersection with race as well, right? And so it's not just the way your body looks as a biologically female body, but also the way that you are highlighted and erased at the same time for race. Yes, it's very, very traumatic. And yeah, I'm still doing that work of unlearning and unpacking the socialization of learning who I am based on these very oppressive standards, which we're taught just by being in that environment, and not to say, to point the finger at any of these people or to say they were horrible people and they made up my friend group, right? But it's still very, very hard to be, to grow up understanding yourself in the context of something that is hurtful to you, a system that is hurtful to you.
Okay. Well, the system part we'll get into a little bit more in a little bit here. And I'm curious, what has your experience been in this area?
So my experience, as of late, kind of processing that is, I had a lot of experiences on the east side of St. Paul that I attributed to they were more life-threatening. And so now, when I moved to Stillwater, I realized just in these past weeks of processing of my allowance for a lot of the microaggressions that I experienced, because my standard was my life felt safe. Like I didn't feel like I was gonna die, you know what I mean? And mine revolved around white supremacist groups and those encounters on the east side. So when I moved here, I just allowed a lot of the microaggressions because, again, I didn't fear my safety as much. So that's been interesting unpacking that.
So it's like, at least they're not gonna try and kill me.
Yeah.
They can, say this blatantly racist stuff.
Exactly,
Okay.
right? And so it's me, I've been unpacking that piece a little bit, but a lot of that too it's the well intentions of the white community, but also just not seeing. So knowing that hypervigilance that comes with walking in a black body. So I'm also biracial, so black and white. And so, and having a white family that I grew up with. So not having the protection of my family, but also not having the protection of community. And so just walking through with that sense of hypervigilance, or even saying, do you see that over there? Do you see those people? And people not getting it. Or, I've been pondering too on how a lot of times for the white body, it's like my experiences are just incidences. They're not realizing, that was one incident. They're not realizing like this is my life, and I'm constantly moving through in that area.
Has the climate changed since like pre-George Floyd and post the murder of George Floyd at all in this community for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, and having spanned this, I'm 45, so I have never seen the white community stand up in such active voices before. So for me in these past, this past month, that's been just a healing response too. I mean, where that goes, we'll see. But I have not seen that in our community, and having gone through the Stillwater schools as well, a lot of any issues that would come up there, it was more we were to just kind of pass it off to the side and move forward. So to me, it's hopeful. It's hopeful that we're having this discourse and this rise up. Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting as you said that white people would look at it as an incident and not a series of incidents that results in one's life. I'll loft this question out later. Do you believe that the community is going to treat this as an incident or continue the work? Sydney, how have things changed in this community for you in the past month and a half versus before, if anything at all?
Yeah, I would say I think that there is a willingness of some people that I never thought before to do some more personal reflection about maybe their own prejudices that they hold that they've never really thought about, because for a lot of people in this community, we were talking about this before, they've never had to think about their race or their identity or what it feels like to walk being a body of color. And I think that I have seen just willingness from my neighbors to do that more. But at the same time, I will say when George Floyd was murdered by the police, I was in Minneapolis. I was staying in Minneapolis that week. And I remember just walking through the streets and just seeing a lot of support and solidarity from the community, but then coming back to Stillwater, to my neighborhood, and just, I felt this like deafening silence, No one was talking about it. It was like life was normal. And in my neighborhood, my family is one of the only black families. I also am biracial. My mom's black, my dad's white. And I don't know if this was my neighbor's intention, but it was so hurtful and painful to not feel that support and solidarity from the people that like I've grown up with.
So does it kind of then, how do I say this, shed a light on everything before the murder of George Floyd, that they were silent then too?
Yeah, and I guess, they were. And it really, I feel like, only became so clear to me in that moment. Like I've had experiences where, you know, people have like questioned my own identity, and that's been really difficult. But yeah, I think in that moment I personally felt so unsupported.